We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph in Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 35a. On the previous summit, there was a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Let's say you have a situation where the person doesn't actually get malchus, but theoretically there can be malchus. Does that pater from tashlumin? Does that pater from having to pay money? And so Reish Lakish says it does. The person is pater even if there's just a theoretical possibility of malchus. And Rabbi Yochanan says no, you actually have to get malchus. And so the Gemara is now in the middle of a question. Reish Lakish is asking on Rabbi Yochanan. The pasuk again is talking about two people who are fighting, and then they hit a pregnant woman and they cause a miscarriage. And so the Gemara understands now, my lav ason mamish. Doesn't it mean to say, when we use the word ason in that pasuk, we're talking about whether there is a death involved of the woman or not? Rashi over here says, my lav ason mamish means to say as follows. Im lo meisa ha'isha means to say, if the woman who is pregnant does not die, yeyonesh hanogef b'dmei valdus. Then we say that the person who hit her, so he has to pay for the miscarriage, he has to pay for that child that was lost. Ha'im meisa, however, if she would die, lo yeyonesh, apparently he's not punished with a monetary payment. V'afilu lo hisrubo, even if there was no warning, so even if it was just a theoretical punishment that was going to happen, that is enough to pater from the punishment of tashlumin. V'kashel Rabbi Yochanan, and that is a question against Rabbi Yochanan. That's Reish Lakish's question against Rabbi Yochanan. And so the Gemara responds, lo, no, that's not what the pasuk means. It means din ason. If there would be a judgment of ason, as Rashi over here says, lo din ason hachi kamar kra. Here's what the pasuk means. Imein mishpat mavis lenogef. If you have a situation where there would be no judgment of death penalty at all for the person, again, the Gemara over here is equating the machlokas Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan is not only by malchus and payment, but also by the death penalty and payment. So the pasuk means to say, if there's no death penalty judgment for the person, kegon shalom meisa isha, meaning she didn't die. O mesa vilo hisrabo, or even if she did die, but there was no warning, so there has to be an actual death penalty. So then anoshianish, so if there's no death penalty at all, so then we say that there's a punishment of monetary payment. But if there is a death penalty, but again, Rabbi Yochanan will understand there has to be an actual death penalty, then there will not be payment. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diamri, there are those who have another version using from the pasuk of Ason in the reverse. Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish, that was Rabbi Yochanan that asked Reish Lakish the question. V'lo yiyeh Ason ano sheyanish, again it says there's a monetary payment if there's no Ason. My lav din Ason, doesn't it mean to say the judgment of Ason, meaning there has to be that if there's a death penalty, then you're pater from payment, but as long as there's no death penalty, so then you're going to have to pay. And so therefore you see that it goes by being actually put to death, not theoretically. And the Gemara says, lo, no, Ason mamish. It means to say that if she was gravely injured, if she died regardless of whether this person will have the death penalty, as long as there's a theoretical death penalty, so to speak, that is enough to pater him from mammon. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Umi iko lamando amar chayve misa shogagin chayavim. But is there really anyone who says that if a person is chayiv misa, but he doesn't actually get the death penalty because it was b'shogeg, that they're chayiv for the monetary payment? Is that true? V'atana de Chizkiya, but it was taught in the yeshiva of Chizkiya, make adam u make behema. The pasuk talks about killing a person and killing an animal, and it puts them next to each other to compare the two. Just like when it comes to killing an animal, so it doesn't matter if it happened by mistake or if it happened on purpose, if it happened with intention or without intention, and if it happened whether it was a downward motion or an upward motion. We don't make any of those distinctions, and we're not talking about patering, we're talking about making the person chayiv. So af Adam, so too when a person kills a person, lo ta'achlok bo bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, bein miskavin, l'shein miskavin, bein derech yirida l'derech aliyah. Don't make any distinctions whether it's by mistake or on purpose, with intention or without intention, in a downward motion or an upward motion. L'chayvo mammon, el l'potro mammon. You're not going to be chayiv mammon, you are going to be pater from money. In other words, it seems like the Talmud of Chizkiya is saying explicitly that in this case it doesn't matter, even if it's b'shogeg, so you don't actually get the death penalty, but still you're going to be pater in terms of paying. And Rashi over here explains, Make adam umake behema, make behema yishal mena. The pasuk is saying if a person kills an animal, you pay. Umake adam lo yishalim. If a person kills a person, so then you don't pay. Elayumas, rather, it's the death penalty. And we understand as follows: Hikish petur mi mamon, petur mamon demake adam lechiv mamon demake behema. We compare the petur from paying when a person kills a person to a situation where you're chayiv to pay money where you kill an animal. When it comes to hitting an animal, there's no difference in terms of having to pay money. Kaf make adam ein lach bo chiluk liftor. So too, when it comes to killing a person, there is no distinction. You're always pater from paying money. Make behema liolam chayev damrina b'baba kama petzatachas patzel chayev ala shogeg kemezer v'yonis karatzen. We understand make behema is going to be chayev to pay money regardless. That's learned from psukim in baba kama. She'ein miskave, and again, if there's no intention, ein bo chiyav misa ba'adam. So then the person is not actually, he doesn't actually receive the death penalty. Derech aliyah, let's say it's an upward motion. Sheiko b'hagbasi, otherwise he's lifting his hand, he kills him. O shechotchu b'charba mil mata l'maler. Again, he's using his sword, but he's going in an upward motion. Bein derech yerida l'derech aliyah. It doesn't matter. Mishum degabe golus. Now, why do we care about upward motion, downward motion? Because by exile, it actually does make a difference. Tehoreg b'shogeg ika chilik. If a person kills by mistake, there's a distinction between a downward motion and an upward motion. Bein derech yerida l'derech aliyah. Kidamrin v'makos. That's what it says explicitly in Makos. Kol shebederech yeridaso gol. If it's a downward motion, then you go to exile. Dechsiv vayipol Allah v'achiyipol kiderech nefila. Uses this language of nefila, falling. It has to be a downward motion, but in any case, it seems clear from the Tana de Vechizke that it makes no difference whether there actually is a death penalty or not. The fact that it was killing a person, which in theory could give somebody the death penalty, is enough to say that there's no chi of tashlumin. And so the Gemara continues, Elokiyasa Ravin Amar, rather when Ravin came, he said as follows, Chayve misos shogegin. When it comes to the death penalty, but again, you do it by mistake, so you don't actually receive the death penalty, so there, Kuli Alma Lo Pligi, there's no machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Everybody agrees, de Peturin, everybody agrees you are pater from monetary payments. There is no monetary payment if the person commits some kind of action, which in theory could have given the death penalty. That's not a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Ki Pligi b'chayve malchus shogegin. The whole machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish was only by malchus, by lashes. In such a situation, if you do that by mistake, so you don't actually receive the lashes, but davar acher, and there's also a monetary payment. Davar acher is something else, referring to a monetary payment involved. That's a machlokas. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev. Rabbi Yochanan says that in such a situation, because it was done b'shogeg, there's no actual malchus, so you're chayev to pay, because chayve misos iskish, chayve malchus lo iskish. When it comes to chayve misos, so there is a comparison. That means to say there's a comparison to make behema. The make adam make behema comparison says that by make adam it makes no difference. When it comes to chayve misos, it makes no difference. There's going to be no monetary payment. But when it comes to chayve malchus, we don't have that comparison, and therefore by chayve malchus, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you're not actually chayiv the malchus, if you don't actually receive the lashes, you have to pay money. Reish Lakish Amar Pater. Reish Lakish says no, even in a situation of malchus, if you don't actually receive the malchus, you're still going to be pater from paying. Befeirush rib satorei chayve malchus ke chayve misos, because the Torah explicitly includes and says that the situations of malchus are compared to situations of misa. And the Gemara says, Heichon rib satorah. Where does the Torah say this? Where do we make this comparison between chayve malchus and chayve misos according to Reish Lakish? And so the Gemara answers, Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Asya Rasha Rasha. We make a Gzereshava from the word Rasha. Rashi over here says, Asya Rasha Rasha. Nemar b'chayve misos asher hu Rasha lamos. By chayve misos it uses the word Rasha. Asher hu Rasha lamos. V'nemar b'chayve malchus v'hoyim bin hakos ha-Rasha. And by malchus as well it uses the word Rasha. So we make a comparison. Again, just like when it comes to chayve misos, we say there's no distinction. The person is pater from paying. So too, according to Reish Lakish, there's no distinction by chayve malchus, and the person is going to be pater from paying. That's the source according to Abaya. Rava says, Asya Maka Maka. Rava says, no, it's a different Gzereshava. The Gzereshava is from the word Maka. Now Rashi over here says, Rava Amar Asya Maka Maka, de Malkus Nami Iskish Lamake Behema. Rava's understanding, it's not that Malkus is being compared to Chayve Misos. It's that Malkus is being compared to Make Behema. Because by Make Behema it talks about hitting, striking an animal. And then also by Malkus it also uses this language of striking. And this Rashi over here says, V'lam Gzereshava de Chayve Misos Yalfin. We're not learning from Chayve Misos here. We're saying again the same comparison as before. Just like by Makeh Behema, we don't make a distinction between Shogeg, Mezid, etc. So too, when it comes to situations of Malchus, we don't make a distinction between Shogeg and Mezid, etc. It doesn't matter if you get the Malchus or not. We're going to say that you're not going to have to pay. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Papa le Rava. So Rav Papa said to Rav as follows. Hi Maka. What word Maka are we referring to over here? Saying there's a Gezer Shava, Maka between Malchus and between the case of Makeh Behema. Ilemo Makeh Behema Yishal Meno Makeh Adam you must. Maybe you'll say it's the same pasuk as before. You strike an animal, you strike a human, but that doesn't make sense. Hi Biktala Ksiv. That pasuk of Makeh Adam is not talking about Malchus. It's talking about killing a person, like we said before. So that can't be the Gezer Shava of Maka. Ella Hi Maka. Rather, it's the following: Makeh Nefesh Behema Yishal Meno Nefesh Tachas Nefesh. It talks about about, again, striking an animal and you pay, etc. And near that pasuk it says, V'ish ki'itein mum ba'miso, kasher asa kenya yasa lo. It talks about the fact that a person makes a mum in his friend, so that's also some kind of a makkah, some kind of a hitting. But the Gemara says, 1 second, v'hai lav makahi. That's not the word makkah, so therefore that's not going to be a good source anyway. Rashi over here says, V'ish ki'itein mum ba'miso, kasher asa kenya yasa lo, v'hai yasa lo malkus ka'amar. So Rashi already tells us that the mum ba'miso obviously is a person striking his friend. That's not talking about malkus, but what it means is when you strike your friend, you receive malkus. Kenya yasa lo. Well, now the problem over here is, the Gemara is going to ask if this is talking about a person wounding his friend. Actually, by wounding, when a person wounds another person, the halach is, as we've said before, that's actually an exception. There you actually have tashlumin, and you don't get malchus. If it's worth a shava pruta, you're actually not going to receive malchus. And so therefore it's a strange proof to bring anyway. But in any case, the Gemara's understanding, Kenya Yasalo, it is a reference to Malchus. V'hai Malchus lav maka ksiv. But the Gemara says, as the Gemara goes on again, V'hai lav makahi. That doesn't say the word maka. V'hai Malchus lav maka ksiv. It doesn't say maka. Elakiyitein mum. Umayasya maka maka. To come Rava. How is Rava making a gzer shava to this pasuk if it doesn't even use the word maka? How could you say there's a gzer shava maka maka if it doesn't use that word? And so to that the Gemara answers, Anon hako amrina. No, what Rava meant to say was not maka, but any case talking about striking in general. When you make a mum, when you give someone a blemish, there must have been some kind of a strike, some kind of a maka, and that is enough to make a gezerah shava. As Rashi over here says, hako amrina, umum al yedei hako hunitan. A mum happens through a hako, and therefore that's enough to make the gezerah shava according to Rava. But the Gemara asks, like Rashi just said, but this pasuk over here of V'ish ki'itein mum ba'miso is talking about a person wounding his friend. And when it comes to wounding a friend, when it comes to a wound, the halach actually is that you do pay money. So how can you say over here we're talking about malchus when the punishment by chova b'chaveru is not malchus? The punishment is actually bar tashlumin. As Rashi over here says, v'chova b'chaveru bar tashlumin u'vehechi mukmas lei at b'malchus u'patru mimamen. How do you say, oh, we're talking about malchus over here, and we're trying to say that since it's a case of malchus, you don't have to pay. This is actually a case where you do have to pay. And so therefore, again, this doesn't seem to be a good source. Again, v'chova b'chaveru bar tashluminu, like we've said, if a person wounds another person, he's a bar tashlumin. And so to that, the Gemara says, no, emeino inyan l'haka sheyesh b'shava pruta. If you can't apply this pasuk to a wound, which is worth a pruta where you do pay, so then t'neu inyan, you can actually apply the pasuk l'haka she'ein b'shava pruta. Understand that the pasuk is talking about where you wound your friend, but the wound is not worth a shava pruta. In that case, there actually is malchus, so we are talking about malchus. Rashi over here says, "Emeino inyan haikra." If you're not going to use this pasuk, lahakash yesh b'shava pruta l'tashlumin, you don't need this pasuk for paying money. Why? To hamikra de basrei alfinan, because there's already a pasuk later on, right after, that says that you pay money. D'chsibei ken yinosin bo davar hanitan miyad liyad. We've quoted this earlier. Ken yinosin bo is understood to refer to davar hanitan miyad liyad, to money. So teneu inyan lahai ken yasalo. Instead, use the kenya yasalo lahakasha ein b'shava pruta to a case where you wounded a person and it wasn't worth a pruta, ula malchus, and then we are talking about malchus. So again, there's a comparison here between malchus and the case of make behema v'iskish la make behema shelo tachluk bo. Again, compared to make behema, don't make distinctions between mezid and shogeg, etc. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis.